Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. We got an important update. Be sure to stick around. We're going to be looking at some divergences, of course, with the larger time frames, kind of comparing dominance, CME futures, and of course the side-by-side for these coins. And then obviously looking at a derivatives market here too. Open interest is significantly high right now, so we want to make sure to pay attention to that. We got a good one here, folks. Let's take a look. All right, folks, let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look here at the crypto market overview for starters. We want to look at Fear and Greed Index, Altcoin Season Index, and of course, the crypto market cap. Kind of what does that mean for us? So the key takeaway here, I would say, for crypto Fear and Greed Index is that the lower the better. In other words, you always want to buy fear and sell greed. So yesterday we were at neutral, the day before or the week before, we're in a greed state. Price is pulling back down to that fear. People are starting to sell more. That's when you want to buy. That's a general concept. So good news. Fear and Greed Index is decreasing. That's a very good sign. It may start to plateau here soon, but I like where it's at. Same thing here with the Altcoin Season Index. This is just kind of a gauge of how well these coins are doing versus Bitcoin. And generally speaking, I've been looking at this for years, pretty much daily. And Altcoin Season Index is just kind of a good representation of where we're at with market capitalization, how well specific coins are doing versus Bitcoin. We're at 1.6 trillion. We came down as low as about 1.54. Staying over that 1.5 trillion level for altcoin market cap is a very good sign. Okay, so those are very good things here we want to understand. Also recognize too, we had a significant amount of ETF net outflow on the 18th. That was 2 trading days ago. This is always a delay. And the good thing is every time that comes down, it inevitably will recover and bounce back. In other words, we've had that trend for the last couple of months where we have 2 or 3 days of heavy outflow and then significant amount of flow back in. So this doesn't necessarily tell us we're going to go up from here. It just tells us that we're more likely to, and the odds are slightly higher. Once more, every time we look at these coins and we kind of do an analysis, we're trying to build a case as to whether or not it's worthwhile or not worthwhile taking a trade. You legitimately should always be convincing yourself not to trade. And if there's too many confirming factors that you're going to go up or down, then you should take a long or short essentially with that. We had a lot of indications yesterday the bottom was in the tentative bottom based on liquidation and previous all-time high support at 112,000 for Bitcoin. All that said, though, we still broke down from a rising wedge pattern. This does tell us the momentum has shifted. So as this indication increases or builds momentum, the more likelihood of further downside. So this doesn't tell us we're going down. It just implies that we want to be careful and not be too naive in taking longs blindly. All that said, excuse me, let's take a look at dominance and recognize that Bitcoin dominance is dropping. It's on the top left here. Obviously, Ethercoin dominance is increasing because it's an altcoin, consistent there with the majority of the altcoin market. Keep in mind, this bottom right-hand side is strictly altcoins, excluding these three categories: stable, Bitcoin, and ETH. So all that said, the bottom right is a true representation here of how altcoins are doing, and they are effectively bottoming out. They're bouncing. It's too early to tell if we're going to continue higher, but it's a very good start. And the key takeaway is that we are seeing money flowing away from stable coins, which is a very common occurrence when altcoin dominance starts to bounce. So in a perfect world, we're going to see this continue to go down and altcoins are going to do very well. One last little caveat here that I know we're not covering ETH today on this analysis. I did so earlier. If you want to know more about that, check out that video. But no CME gaps are present any longer on ETH as well. So that essentially got filled, fully filled. And we bought that dip at 4,100. And if you're not familiar, or perhaps you're not in our Discord, you may not know, but we secured 35% profit on our ETH long, and the average entry was 4,100. We're also long on Bitcoin at 112,600 and secured a little bit more profit to the downside with our AVAX short. Okay, so anyways, what I want to look at here next is kind of the backend data for Bitcoin and go from there. Just quickly recognize where we're at here in the overall sets. So let's go ahead and refresh this guy, get a new loadout just to be safe, and kind of recognize where we're at. So the average top trader are short right now, which makes sense. Basically, they have a lot of money to control the market with. And generally speaking, this just tells us that they are bearish. It doesn't mean you should do the same thing, because we have more bids than asks. More people are trying to buy than sell. So really, that's null and void for the most part. What's important is that people are trying to buy these dips, because open interest is super high right now. I didn't touch on that. In fact, we can go ahead and do so right now. The derivatives here, we're up 30% in futures interest today versus yesterday. Yesterday, we were at 4 billion. Today, we're at 5.4. That's a significant amount of buying the dip power in futures. Keep in mind, as a futures, that scale changes consistently, but generally speaking, open interest is super high, and you want to buy in the direction of open interest. Okay. Now, furthermore, if we take a look at the open interest section here, or basically just a representation of a heat map of open interest, where are people buying the most Bitcoin? 115,500 is that local area. So I would recommend considering securing profits between now and then. For example, I think our take profit target on our Bitcoin long is 114,900, if I'm not mistaken, just below that key level resistance range. So I like to secure profits before we hit resistances. And once more, that's an open interest resistance for Bitcoin. Liquidation delta is at 10 billion here for Bitcoin, which is not super substantial, but it still tells us more bears than bulls are in the market right now. The last 7-day time frame for liquidation doesn't tell us too much. If we zoom in though on the 24-hour period, we can see there's liquidation both above and below the price at 114.5 to 115.5 and 111 to 112. Okay, both above and below. But we're getting closer to this upper range, so we're likely to see a bit of a short squeeze into that 115K range and then potentially pull back from there. That's roughly what we're looking at there for Bitcoin on the back end. Daily time frame, we want to also understand here that we're in still a descending trend. We're below the important moving averages here at 116,000. We're seeing confluence at 116, both open interest and moving averages reinforcing resistance there. We're also under 50 in the RSI, and we may actually be closer to 50 when we're testing that 116K range. So in my opinion, we've definitely broken bearish on the daily. So it's important to be mindful that if you are taking longs, you want to be taking longs with caution because we haven't effectively established higher highs yet, right? These are all the examples of lower highs. So it's a consistent trend. Trend hasn't been broken. Try not to get too ahead of yourselves. All that said, there's a fair value gap upwards about 117. And if we take a look at the 4-hour, as per usual, it's going to be bullish because we have a significant recovery, a bounce off that 30 level on the RSI. So everything's looking pretty strong here in the short term, but big picture, longer term, we're seeing a divergence still. All right, moving on to Chainlink. Let's go ahead and take a look at this beast. This coin recovered super significantly. 10% up on the day. I'm excited to see what's going on here. So taking a look at the back-end data here for Chainlink, we want to recognize there's a tremendous amount of open interest in the current range of 24.40 to 25.50. So people are just buying the heck out of this in that basically that round number $25 support range. We look at liquidation delta. This is one of the few coins that actually has a larger amount of longs and shorts. We have more longs than shorts at this point, only about 200 million, but it's still in the green, okay? And we take a look, of course, as well with liquidation, 27 to 27.50 is that upper area liquidation. Probably going to be in trouble there for any kind of short position here trying to short the top. It does look like we're starting to form maybe a cup and handle, potential retest of that resistance range. So Chainlink's looking pretty solid from the outside looking in. What's the daily time frame tell us? Well, we currently have a bullish engulfing candle. If we close above 25.75 today, that would incentivize the price to continue higher, which is a very, very good sign. And overall too, like this coin, I've covered its consistently the last couple of weeks. I can tell you it's remained very bullish the entire time. So you generally don't want to try to short against that, even though I'm sure that it's very tempting to try to short a coin that's overextended. But this coin is consolidating so well in its range that it's extremely more likely to go higher. We take a look here at our point of control, $24 at heavy support level. We also got confluence there with that 0.68 and 0.5 fib level in that same range. So 24 to 23.50 is that solid area of consideration for long if the price were to pull back to that level. Keep in mind, we may not see that again, but that is just essentially what we're looking at there. 4-hour time frame still looks fantastic. There's not much that's changed from yesterday, even though we did diverge, lost our potential support there at about 24.50. Once more, 24.50 to 25.50 is that heavy amount of volume based on open interest in the last month. So open interest, points of control, MACD convergence, there's literally everything here telling us we're going to go higher. So I would not recommend shorting this coin. Chainlink looks to be a big deal right now. Okay, so easy way to understand it. Take a look here at Litecoin. Let's go ahead and double check the back end first before we jump in to the charts, and just want to touch on the fact that we have heavy open interest here locally at 113.50. So that's a nice area of support. Just know tremendous amount of exit liquidity potential at 127. So if the price keeps going higher, we got a lot of resistance at 127, but that's a little ways away. So you have a pretty good spread, if you will, if you're going to consider a long. There's not like a lot of immediate resistance above us based on open interest. Now we take a look at liquidation delta. It's looking pretty solid. And what I mean by solid is it's bearish, but it's also higher potential for a short squeeze, having broken its descending trend. I'll show you more here on that in a minute. 125 is that massive area of liquidation. So we have open interest at 127 and liquidation 125. That's a perfect situation. What that tells us is that securing profits around 125 would be a smart call if you're in a long, and hypothetically a short in that 125 to 127 seems sensible as well. Granted, this is further down the road. We may not even see that happen, but the general concept is that these areas of liquidation and or open interest are highly coveted by market makers. They like to move the price in these directions and oftentimes reverse it in those areas. So I think we could very well run to that level, but we got to recognize too, if we zoom out here, I see a lot of volume at 122. Is that specifically the level? 122, yeah. So that's our immediate resistance. We got 122 and 127 as those areas of resistance based on volume and open interest, which are extremely important, folks. Take a look here. We do have a fair value gap upwards of 128. Not concerned with that. We're below the 50. Sorry, we're above the 50, but below the 20-day SMA. So overall, pretty decent situation here with stochastic swinging up. The daily time frame looks fairly strong here for this coin, even though we are still below some key levels. So I wouldn't necessarily take a long because of that, but just know the macro is kind of in this transition. We haven't transitioned bearish yet, and that's usually a good sign when Bitcoin is starting to hold the line and we're seeing altcoins slowly recover. Altcoins are doing fairly well, all things considered, and this is another one of those coins that's also moving well with the market. Anyways, we did break our descending trend. This is just something I want to touch on. When you essentially establish a higher high, which is higher than the most recent high, and you break your descending trend, that's usually an early reversal sign. So if you're going to consider a long, remember a long between now and 122 would be appropriate. But just know there is a little bit of resistance here as well at 119. That was a previous low that hasn't been retested really all that much yet. So the three areas to pay attention to would be 119, 122, and 127. So Litecoin, in my opinion, is looking viable at this point. It certainly looks like it wants to continue higher, and it's also been a beast of a coin in the recent past as well. It responds very quick and pretty much jumps up fast. So be careful trading that coin, specifically careful shorting. It's not a recommended coin to consider shorting right now. All right, so Cardano. What's going on here? We got heavy open interest at 83 cents. We saw the price action bounce off that range, and then 95 cents is the next area. So keep in mind, 95 cents is heavily guarded. So if you're in a long, secure profits prior to that, we can see liquidation short delta is still high, in reinforcing potential for a short squeeze. But keep in mind, there is a lot of liquidation still below the price at this 83 to 82 cent range. So if we see one more leg down, 82 to 83 would be an optimal entry. Between now and then, you want to presume that this current range that we're traveling into, this 89 cent resistance range, is going to reject out the price. In other words, we can see consistency here. Multiple attempts to break that level in the past. It hasn't retested that level yet. It's really common for the price to reject off that level the first time. So I'm expecting a rejection here for Cardano. Now we take a look at the daily though. Big picture is looking pretty solid. There's not much here telling us we're going to go further down. We're still maintaining above a lot of key levels. So I like what I see here from the macro on Cardano, and then the 4-hour time frame. It's mostly bullish with a lot of other confirming factors, just like other coins are. But we do have, once more, a lot of resistance above us with moving averages too. So I'm speculating 89 to 90 cents will be a solid resistance range for us for this coin. So if you're considering a long, consider securing profits soon, just to be on the safe side. There's nothing wrong with securing profits early. While it's a bummer when that happens sometimes, you're still walking away in the green. Getting greedy in this market is just not a viable option. Take a look here at ONDO, the last one here, ONDO Finance. Let's look at the back end first and just quickly note that we got, 108 is that resistance for us. And then below we got 96 and roughly $1 even. So those are just some open interest areas there to consider. Specifically 108 is that heaviest concentration. Big surprise, liquidation short delta is high to the downside. And we look at the last 7 days here. Most of the local liquidation has been swept. We just got some late longs at 90 cents. It looks like 105 to 110 is that next concentration. So I'm expecting 105 to 110 to be the next destination for this coin, under the impression it can break through its local high here. This is also a golden pocket 0.68 fib level at 95. So 95 cents is that point of contention. Closing above 95, as you can kind of see here, is a pretty big deal because it's previously been a resistance level. So getting above that range is be important. So if Bitcoin goes sideways for a couple of days, ONDO is hanging out at 95 cents. I think that's a solid place to consider a long position. But just know we got majority of all moving averages just above the price right now. That's not really an optimal condition to take a long into. Same thing with the resistance here at 50 on the RSI. We haven't broken through those thresholds yet. So as that implies a solid closure above 95, but more importantly, like 97, 98 would be even more optimal. So that way we could run towards that 105 to 110 range with that open interest and that liquidation above the price. Between now and then, it's considered to be high risk if you take a long just yet. So I usually like to hold off and wait to see how Bitcoin behaves first when doing so. But this coin does tend to run. So just be mindful. It may be smart to consider a small position, low leverage or low position size, just to ensure you're not overdoing it, leading into a initial resistance. Okay, but the truth is, 4-hour time frame really doesn't look that great. We're seeing a lot of moving averages above the price. We're not over 50 yet here in the RSI. I think it's a little premature to take a long just yet. Even if this coin takes off tomorrow, I'm still going to feel good about not taking a position just yet, because I like to wait for realistic prices within the ranges that I'm looking for instead of trying to trade a convergence, so to speak. Right? Just know right now it's kind of a flip of a coin. I don't like to flip coins when I take trades. I like to ensure that the odds of are like 70, 80, or even 90% or higher, right? 50-50 doesn't really work. And that's kind of where we're at for ONDO for the moment. I'd be on the lookout for a closure above 95 today, specifically Bitcoin above 114K as well. And if that happens, then I think further upside makes sense. Just know this, unless volume can remain high on this coin, we're probably going to reject out and continue lower if Bitcoin pulls back. All right, folks, that's what we got there. Hopefully it was very beneficial. Thanks again for tuning in. Check us out at BitUnix too. Link down below. No KYC or VPN required for these guys. And obviously join us on our Twitter, Telegram, or Discord. We got a pretty awesome community over there. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you have a good rest of your day. We look forward to seeing the next one. Take care of yourself out there. Bye-bye.